Putting your numbers into context is so important because if I tell you I have sales of 1 million, is that good? Is it bad? I don't know. We need to have a reference point or we need to know what the trend is. Well, one way to do that is with a target area. Now for adding this target area, you needed this crazy workaround, but since the March 22 release, it is much easier and you can do it with just a few clicks. Now let me show you how it works. Welcome to How to Power BI. My name is Bas, and if this is the very first time for you visiting this channel, then make sure to hit that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date on all of my videos in which I share everything I know about Power BI. Now let's have a look how we can add a target area to a line chart in an easy way. Now first of all, you need to be on the March 22 version or later, and you need to go over here to options, and then here on the preview features, you need to make sure that error bars is selected. What? Error bars? Isn't that some statistical stuff? Well, it is. However, we can also build a target area with it. Now let me show you how it works. Now for this example, I have this chart over here, which shows the total cost development over time. And we want to make sure that the total costs are within a certain range. Let's say between 2 and 300. So we want to build a target range that visualizes this. Now to do this, we can select the chart, go to the Analytics tab, and there we find now error bars. Now here we can say that we want to apply the error bars to the total cost measure, so that's all good. And then we go to options, and there we can turn the error bars on. Now here we have two wells, one for the upper bound and one for the lower bound. So we have to use measures that determine these boundaries. Now these measures we don't have yet, so let's add these two. And the first one I'm going to call upper bound, and let's hard code a value of 300. And then we do exactly the same for the lower bound. And there we choose a value of 200. So now that we have our two measures for the boundaries, we can use them in the visual. So I take upper bound and put it here on the upper bound well. And I do the same for the lower bound. And now in the visual, we see we have our error bars, but this is not exactly how I want it to look like. So let's make it a little bit prettier. So instead of the bars, I want to show, first of all, a shaded area. So the bars I'm going to turn off, shaded area I'm going to turn on. And then maybe I also want to have a little line at the boundaries of that shaded area. So I turn the line on as well. And that's it. This took so much time before and now it's so easy. This took me less than a minute to create, which is really quick if you compare that with the alternative that we had to use before. So at the moment, this is a static target area. However, we could also shift it over time. For example, if we want to shift the boundary for the year 22 to, let's say, 250 to 350, we could do that as well. So you can just go back to the measure. What you could do is build a table that has the development of the upper bound over time, or you could also make the upper bound relative to a measure, or how I'm going to do it at the moment is I'm going to do it in the measure. So I'm going to use, let's say, switch function. And here we want to look at the year. So I'm going to take the year with the selected value function, and I'm going to refer to the year in my date table. And if it's the year 21, then I want to have a value of, let's say, 300. And if it's 22, then I want to have a value of 350. And then I'm just going to copy this over also to the lower boundary measure. And then over here, we're going to replace the 200 with our switch function so that we have 200 for the year 21 and 250 for the year 22. And there you go. Now we have a different target area for the year 22 versus 21. All right. Now, this is nice. However, maybe what you're looking for is a dynamic target area that's relative to a measure. So for example, maybe you have a forecast for the years 21, 22, and you want to build a confidence interval around that forecast. Now, also for this, you can use the error bars feature. Now let me show you how that works. So here I have another report with a visual that shows the sales forecast over time. And I want to, first of all, build a forecast interval around it. Let's say plus 10% and minus 10% relative to the forecast line. So the error bar feature is already enabled, so that's all good. So I can now go here to the Analytics tab. And then from here, we're going to go to error bars. And this time we apply the error bars to the sales forecast. And here we can turn them on. So also here we have to write measures for the upper bound and the lower bound. However, one thing is going to be a bit different this time. And that is instead of having here absolute, we're going to have the relationship to that forecast sales measure to be relative. So let's switch over here to relative. And then we're going to add our measures. And let's call the first one forecast plus 10%. And here we can refer to our sales forecast and multiply that with 10%. Now we just have to copy this measure and do this then also for the lower boundary. And the only thing that I have to change over here is the plus to a minus sign and multiply this with minus 10%. So now we have our two measures and we can place them on the upper boundary and lower boundary well. So let's just drag them on there. And then very important is we have to change the relationship to measure to relative. All right, and the rest is just formatting like we did before. So also here, I want to get rid of the bars. I turn the line on and the shaded area I turn on as well. And then over here, we can make that shaded area a little bit more transparent, maybe 90%. And maybe to make clear that this is a forecast, let's not go for blue. Let's save blue for the actuals. And then here for the forecast, we switch to gray. So over here, we have to go to the Format tab. Then here we go to Lines. And then here we want to customize the series. Let's turn it on. Now here at the moment, we just have one series. And here we can set the color to gray. And then also here for the line style, let's go for dashed. All right, perfect. So we have our target area, but where are the actual sales? Well, let's add them to the visual as well. So over here, let's take the sales actuals, put them on values, and there you have the actual sales. Well, it's now also dashed, maybe not so pretty. So let's go again to formatting and then here on the lines. Now we have customize series on. So now we can select sales actuals. Now here we don't want to have dashed, but we want to have a solid line. And here for the colors, let's go for a different blue. Let's go for this lighter blue. All right, so now we have our dynamic target area that we were looking for. And this was much easier than the workaround that we needed before the March 22 version. However, we can still do a little bit better. So let's make a few more changes. For example, here the legend we don't really need. So I'm going to get rid of that one. Let's turn it off. And for the size of the target area, we could also use what if parameters so that we don't have to hard code the 10%. So let's do this. Let's go over here to the top to modeling. And then here we can go for a new parameter. And then here we can say this is the target range. And here we want to have decimal numbers between 0 and 1. And then here for the increment, we're going to choose 0.01. And for the default, let's put it to 0.05. Now also here, add slides to this page. Well, that's kind of nice. Let's click on OK. And I'm going to put the target range, what if parameter right above the visualization. And then we resize over here the slicer. And let's choose a value. And let's just go for 0.05. So here we have our what if parameter. But if we change the value, let's put it to, let's say 0.5 or 0.10. Nothing happens yet because we didn't link it to a measure. So let's go to the measure for the lower boundary first. So here, instead of hard coding the 10%, we are going to refer to the measure that returns the selected value of that what if parameter. So in our case, that measure is called target range value. So minus and then target range value, there it is. And we're going to do the same for the upper boundary. So also here, we want to refer to the target range value. So let's try to change the value of the what if parameter again using that slicer. And you see now the target range becomes wider and wider. All right. So that is working. However, it's still kind of difficult to see which data points are outside of the target area and which ones are inside of the target area. And for that, we are going to add labels. All right, but we don't want to show all of the labels. We only want to show labels for those data points that are outside of the target area. So let's insert a new measure. And here we can call this one labels and then use a simple if function. So here we want to see if the sales actual is below the lower boundary first. So we have a lower than sign. And how can we calculate the lower boundary? Well, we can refer first of all to the forecast measure, sales forecast. And from the forecast, we want to subtract the value to get to the lower boundary. So here we can say plus, and then here we have the forecast minus 10%. All right, why the plus? Because the forecast minus 10% is the negative value. Now then the second condition is that we want to say or sales actual. So over here, we can again refer to sales actual. And then we have the sales forecast, just like we have up there, and then the plus 10%. So basically, this logical condition just checks if the sales is outside of the target area. And if it is, then only then we want to show the actual sales. And otherwise, nothing, so blank. So now that we have that measure, we can place it also on the visual. So take labels, put it over here on values, and it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Well, I made a mistake. Let's go back to the measure. And over here in the measure, you see that I'm now comparing here sales actuals and see if it's lower than sales forecast. And here the order in which things happen is important, because first we need to say sales forecast plus over here the forecast minus 10%. So I put brackets around it, and then also the same for that second condition over there. And now it should work. And still nothing? If this happens, then the next thing that you need to check is if you go here to format and then lines. Well, here we have customize series all, and you see my labels are still in blue. Oh, all right, so let's just change those to orange, or maybe even better, let's change it to red so that we can see it a little bit better. And then also here on the markers, I want to turn them on. Customize series is on. Then here for sales forecast, I'm going to turn the markers off. Then here for the sales actuals, I'm going to turn it off. But then for the labels, we leave them on. And with these settings, now we see the dots. Perfect. And you see we have a few markers outside of the target area. Now to put even more emphasis on it, we could also add the labels then for those markers that are outside of the target area. So let's go back to formatting. And then here we have data labels, turn it on. Now here, the same thing as before, we only want to have labels for, well, the labels measure. So here I first select the other ones, turn the labels off. And then here for the labels measure, there I do want to show labels. And then we just have to format it a little bit differently. For example, we could add a background and then make the background red. And then put the transparency down a little bit. And then over here, we can go to values and set the color to white. And we have our markers in place. And if I drag this a little bit more to the right so that we have not that many, and there you see it looks a bit better, and it draws the attention to those data points that are outside of the target area. Now, one thing that I overlooked is that we don't have percentages over here for the what if parameter. Now that's easy to fix. Now just select here from that table that belongs to the what if parameter, the target range, select it, go to column tools, and then choose percentage. And that's how you can create a target area, static and dynamic, using error bars. However, you need to be on the March 22 version. If you cannot be for some reason on the March 22 version, then check out one of these two videos in which I show you a workaround. However, it's a little bit more effort. I hope that you liked this video and got some value out of it. If you did, then hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on all of my videos. And I want to thank you and see you in the next video.